Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're here again with Natalie Tilson with Biblical Principles in Financing, and we want to welcome you to our program tonight. Natalie, welcome, and what do you have tonight?
Well, Scott, tonight I thought it would be a good idea if we talk a little bit about mortgages.
Ooh, that's a big one.
That is a very big one.
Yes.
And, looking at this topic, Scott, mortgages and purchasing a house or building a house, that's one of the biggest decisions that some of us make in our lifetime, aside from, of course, choosing to follow Christ
Right.
and decisions like that. But, when it comes to our financial decisions, that's a big one.
And it's something we need to enter into not lightly, and maybe even doing some homework to figure it out. I know, Natalie, the markets now are like anything that we've ever seen in history.
True.
And so we really need to educate ourselves on some of those pitfalls and things that are out there. What do you have for us?
Well, in looking at it, our decisions that we make and in our Christian walk, we need to make sure that we're really searching for what the Word of God says in these things, and not, just do knee-jerk type decisions that we make. So it's a huge decision. It can have life consequences. And if we find ourselves making a decision too quickly without prayerfully considering and doing our due diligence, then that can be a tremendous burden. And as we know, when we go into a mortgage, we're talking 15 years
That's
or
right.
so.
And if we do it wrong, we could almost be handcuffed or drugged down by
Exactly.
that debt for a long time.
Exactly. So it's so important that we look at this. And one of the things as I did my preparations for discussing this, I was looking at Mark chapter 7, and I was looking at what Jesus says defiles a person. And included are some of the things like coveting, deceit, pride, foolishness. And I got to thinking about that. How many times do we look at, I've got to have this house, I've got to have it right now, and I've got to have a bigger, better house than my parents, or I've got to have a nicer house than the person that I work with that I really don't like that well,
That's
or
right.
something.
Or the way marketing is today too, Natalie, that we deserve it.
Exactly.
I grew up poor, if you say that, and I didn't have any things, I deserve this, I deserve it. But that can really, again, be a noose around your neck because of these sins that the Bible's talking about,
Right.
covetousness, wanting something else. So Mark 7's really got a lot of application there.
It sure does, Scott. And when we look at this, I think that we sort of need to look at a checklist and consider, do we have any of this? Is that what's driving us
Right.
for to purchase a home or to build a home? And we need to first deal with those type of issues before we really take on
That is
such
excellent,
a
and that
big
may be one of the
role.
most important things. I'll probably say that 2 or 3 times tonight, but when people start dating, I tell them, that's too late to wait to make a list. You need to make a list before you
Right.
start dating, fall in love. Same thing on when you're in the housing market.
Mm-hmm.
You need to write down what you really feel like God is wanting in your life and check those all those things off, because once you see that house, a lot of times you'll overlook
Oh, yes.
all the blemishes and things like that, when you see that. Yeah.
That is true, and we can find ourselves in such a financial burden. I was reflecting on when I first started out in my career, one of my first jobs, and this was in a totally different state. But I had a boss that he seemed to be, moving on up the corporate ladder, which was okay, that's fine. But his wife really expected to be part of the social scene, the upper echelon of
Right.
that community,
Right.
and she pushed him, wanting to live in a neighborhood that really they could not afford. They were
Right.
in their early 30s at
Yeah.
the time, and she just really wanted that and pushed for this house. And he, of course, wanted to give her everything that she wanted. And he ended up in an embezzlement
Wow.
case.
Oh my goodness.
stealing
Because that
money.
temptation was there. Because
That temptation
yeah, wow.
was there because they felt that they really needed this house that they couldn't
Wow.
afford, instead of, looking at it for maybe a plan for later years
Yeah.
to come.
And
or
how much more
something.
embarrassment would that be instead of
Oh.
not having the house? And the guy worked probably really, really hard, but just couldn't keep up with the debt that he was
Exactly.
going in as well.
Yeah, and he found himself just getting,
That's sad.
digging a deeper hole.
Yeah.
And that's the type of things that we need to guard our heart and make sure that we set some parameters for ourselves and discuss those with our spouse, and
Right.
just really be level-headed in a decision this large.
Right.
Because, we're talking about eliminating debt in our classes and not having any debt at all. And this is one area that I would say is okay to have debt as long as it is controlled and we don't blow it out of proportion here.
Because there are some stipulations on that debt, because the debt's got to be entered into with the mindset, we're going to pay that back.
Oh, exactly.
Unlike our government sometimes and other things like that, it's very, very important that we've got a
Right.
plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, in Luke chapter 14, verses 28 through 30, I wanted to point this out, and I love this verse. It says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower, or in this case, a house. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.'" I mean, how appropriate is that for
Yeah.
this day and
And then
age?
lose the money that you've invested there. And we have a lot of people from our church and our community that got caught in the middle of this craziness with the COVID, that they were in the middle of building a house, and then all of a sudden the lumber prices went up 30% or more, and
Right.
and the house that they thought was going to be this number is now this number.
Exactly.
But they, that was unforeseen, but things happen, right?
It sure does, and that's why it's so important to have a plan, to stick to your plan, and to set those parameters in place and just really be disciplined. And so one of the things that I want people to realize is that in building or buying a home, there's hidden costs involved there. Property taxes are something that people really don't think about when they're looking at home.
Some people are in the county and the city.
Exactly.
And you never take that in consideration, and that's a pretty
Right.
good chunk.
Until it comes
Yeah.
later on, and then they realize, whoa, I'm
Yeah.
really in a financial burden here.
Yeah.
Repairs and maintenance, if you're purchasing a home, right now I'm hearing stories of people just placing offers on homes, and they've not even taken the time to have it to even look at it,
Look
or
at or inspect
inspection
it,
done.
and then it's coming back to bite a lot of people, because people are so desperate and they're making these decisions
Yes.
without the plan. Yeah.
Exactly. Association fees, depending on
Yep.
where you live, if you're going to live in a neighborhood that has that.
Right.
And private mortgage insurance, or PMI. And what that is, Scott, it just protects the lender, not you, but it protects the lender in the event that you stop making payments. And so if you're not putting down enough up front, a lot of times you will be expected to pay PMI insurance.
So I'm paying that insurance for the bank,
Yes.
pretty much, to ensure their equity and what I'm getting there. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are things that, just to name a few, there's plenty more. But of course, things like just furnishing a new home can really, you have to take that into consideration. You don't want
you want all new stuff. You get a new home, and I was sharing with you before we started tonight, I was in the air freight business, and I would make deliveries to these really, really nice homes. And when I'd ring the doorbell, people would come into the door, and there wouldn't be a piece of furniture in the house. It sounded like a cave in there, and I thought it was just because they were new, moving in the area, but then I realized after delivering there for a year or two that they just couldn't afford to put any furniture in the place.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of times that goes back to looking at those sins that are within us, before we even purchase a home. Are we doing it just to say, oh, I live here in this neighborhood?
But if you can't afford to eat or
exactly.
clothe your kids, it's
what good is it doing for you?
Yeah.
So I would say what I would tell people to do is to be disciplined, look at those hidden costs, and to make sure that your mortgage, with all those hidden costs included in there, are no more than 25% of your take-home pay.
Wow, that's a good point.
And I know a lot of people are going to say, only 25%, but I qualify for so much more. Well, of course the bank's going to tell you that you qualify for more, and you probably will, because they want for you to have a huge mortgage. They're not looking out for your best interest. They really don't care if you're laying awake at night wondering, how am I going to make my next mortgage?
Right. That's so true.
They just want to try and get, the biggest loan that you can possibly afford. And sometimes realtors will try to use the tactic of, your mortgage might only be another $100 a month. $100 a month, that's not much money, because, they want to try to get you to purchase a larger home.
And you do that on 15 years or 30 years, then you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
or
these
more
are,
years.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you really have to be mindful of these things. So don't allow people to talk you out of what you have set up front. This is the amount of home that I can afford.
That's right. And that's on your list that we started out with. That's good. Yeah.
And stick to that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we want to make sure that we can get as debt-free as soon as possible.
Right.
And I would recommend no more than a 15-year mortgage and a fixed rate at that. And try to pay it off just as fast as you can. And of course, if you can have a larger down payment,
right.
10 to 20%, that of course can get you more of a home,
right.
Possibly more home for your money.
That's right.
And still keep your monthly mortgage around what you've set at that 20 to 25% of your take-home pay.
Right.
And notice I'm saying take-home pay, so that's after taxes.
That's right.
Don't be looking at
that's
what your gross is.
That you've got to work. That's right. And that's important to know, because you don't have that to play with, and that's not in the financial pot to pull out of.
That is true, because we certainly don't want to get ourselves.
And if you tithe, that also comes out of there as well.
So we need to look at all of this.
Yes.
and make sure that we stick to our plan.
Right.
And I would also recommend that, sometimes people have this idea that renting is terrible and we shouldn't rent because we will never actually own anything.
Right.
Well, I would argue, when you're looking at a loan, the first so much of that loan for several years is just going towards interest anyway. So you're kind of throwing the money away when you look at it.
Yeah.
So if you're renting and you're staying below in your rental payment what you can actually afford, and saving that money for a better down payment.
You could bank that. Yeah.
Exactly.
You could put thousands literally down on that over a period of 5-6 years or something, or whatever you want to do. Yeah.
And possibly avoid the PMI insurance that you're having to pay out.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need to understand that it's okay to start out, and it doesn't have to be your dream home that you're starting out with. You can always build that equity. You can always, as your career advances or whatever, you can always move to a bigger house if that's what you
so you don't have to start out with
a
500-inch TV set, right? We think that we need to have everything that our parents had, and we don't realize that it took them 20, 30 years to acquire those things. And but it helps. This information is just critical in the day we live, so that we are not in bondage to the lender.
That is exactly right. And as fast as we can get that paid off, that of course is the ultimate goal, because we want to have that freedom from that financial bondage.
Right. I know, we have people sitting out there today that have been paying maybe on your mortgage for 10 or 15 years. And if that's the case, you may want to really look at refinancing at this point in time, because if you can knock your financial points down 2 or 3 times on what your interest rate is, then it may pay you to refinance. And I have done that twice. And we were able to pay off our home, because the first time I did it, kept the payments almost the same, knocked off 15 years right from the get-go. Right. And to me, it's a no-brainer, but people don't understand that, and they don't know that.
That's so true, because we're taught to think that you've got to keep a mortgage, that a mortgage is just a part of your life, and banks would love for us to think that.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, once you can
Financial
pay that
freedom,
off,
that's right.
That's the key.
Yeah.
That is the key.
That is great.
Yes.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time. And we've got an attachment that we're going to be putting below, so you can click on that for a devotional, and some of the scriptures are in there. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Send an email to the church here, and we'll get that on to Natalie. We probably need to get you an email address here, and tie it into the church so we can help you with that. But thank you so much for joining us. And, it's so important, your finances, and especially the purchase of a house. So spend time in prayer. Make sure you and your spouse are on the same page with that. And do diligence in getting that list together with the stuff Natalie shared tonight. Been very great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Good day. God bless.